If you're like me, you may not have even considered how many options you have or which ones you need to be thinking about as far as long-term storage for sweeteners and sugars and the like. So, in the next few minutes, I want to share with you what I found out, some really intriguing details about our options that we have, and I want to share with you at least 14 or more options that you might want to consider when you're thinking about sweeteners for your long-term storage. So stay with us. All right, so when I started doing my research, it was like a Pandora's box of options, and I can't wait to talk through just a few of them with you and some of the interesting things that I found out about our options regarding sweeteners. Now, the reason this all came about onto my radar in the first place was that month that I told you about in a video previously, where I did not spend a penny on anything, and I wanted to see which supplies ran out first. And incidentally, sugar happened to be one of the things that I used a little more of than I thought I would. I ran out of my fake sugars and sweeteners first, and then the actual sugars through baking, and I realized I used quite a bit more than I realized. So it got me thinking, which ones do I need to store, how much of it do I need to store, and what's the best one as far as health that I can afford to store. So let's talk through a few of these. Over here on the one side of your screen, I'm not sure if it's your left or right, but it's on my right, is Mirena pure cane sugar. Now, I'm not exactly sure. I think Mirena has to do with the brand name of it, but this is an excellent sugar. This is pure cane, and that means it's from sugar cane, and it's all natural, it's non-GMO, and it is free of bone char. Now, I didn't even know that was a thing until I started researching, when I found out that to bleach and to filter sugar, any kind of sugar, into the granules, often bone char is used. And that is just charred animal bones. Can you believe that? So, a lot of our sugar has it in it. For those of you who are vegan, you might want to start reading your labels, and if that's important to you, you'll want to make sure it says right on the label, non-use of bone char or bone char free. All right, but that is commonly used to process sugars. Next to this, I have just what we're most familiar with. This is a common brand where I live, Domino Sugar, but this is premium pure cane granulated sugar. This is what we often use in our recipes. It's only 15 calories per teaspoon, which is a serving size. The only thing is I found out a few things about this. Incidentally, here in, at least where I am in the United States, it's not required that the label of your sugar tell how much is actually sugar cane and how much is from sugar beets. Now, sugar cane is often grown organically. It doesn't have to be genetically modified, but sugar beets are genetically modified. And so, if about 50% of this might be made with sugar beets, you might want to do a little bit more research before you load up on what you're going to choose for your family. That is if you're being very particular. Now, I will say, in the event of an emergency, I'm not going to be very particular. And so you can give me all the grief you want about GMO versus non-GMO, but if we're in a very desperate situation, I will be thankful for whatever is provided, and that is one of the things that's going to slip off my radar of important factors to consider. But right here on the front end, while I'm preparing, that can be a very good thing to think about and look into. All right, I love me some maple syrup. If you are in a part of the country where you can make this yourself, do. Make sure you recognize where maple trees are around you. Learn the process of tapping those trees and the process of going through the laborious and lengthy time that it takes, but totally worth it, to make your own maple syrup. This is shelf stable indefinitely, just like table sugar is, which is wonderful. And it's going to be able to be used in many recipes, however, not everything. So keep that in mind. I'm going to skip over this right here and go to this little guy down here. This is really raw honey. In fact, this is, you can't really tell on this, but it is filled with even the honeycomb in there. It is non-filtered. It is so raw. it comes with the honeycomb. And so I did some research, and thankfully, yes, honeycomb is also indefinitely shelf stable. In fact, in Egyptian tombs, they have found honeycomb and honey that is perfectly sweet and wonderful to use, that is over 3,000 years old. So even though the FDA, I think, probably labels it that they recommend somewhere between 2 to 3 to even 5 years shelf life, know that if you have pure honey, or even pure honey still on the honeycomb, it is indefinitely shelf stable. What a blessing. If you can raise bees and make your own, get your own honey, that's the way you want to go. All right, let's back up to this one. Here in the back I have Confectioners Sugar. And a lot of people have written into me and asked how shelf stable this is. I will say it is supposed to be shelf stable, but I haven't had really great luck with it. Partly because most often you're going to find powdered sugar in very thin plastic bags inside the box that it comes in. And that just absorbs the smells and tastes of its surroundings. It gets kind of this mustiness to it. And if any moisture even gets near it, you know how powdered sugar just kind of clumps up into a rock, and you really don't want that. So if there's one of these kinds of sugars that I'm just probably not going to worry about having too much in my long-term pantry, it's going to be powdered sugar. All right, let's go over here to this. Now this is kind of interesting. This is molasses, and some of you, in fact many of you, including myself, grew up thinking that the word sorghum and the word molasses were virtually interchangeable, or that perhaps it's even the same thing. Well, interestingly, it's not. If you get molasses, this is made with sugar cane. If you get sorghum, it's actually made with sorghum. And for those of us who are homesteaders, oh my word, sorghum is the bomb. You can do so many things with it, and we'll have a different video that extols all the virtues of growing your own sorghum and why we all should have some in our back pasture. But one of the reasons is because you can make your own sorghum. And it's very much like this molasses, but this is actually made out of sugar. And again, thankfully, this is indefinitely shelf stable. I would strongly recommend you get some and have it there in your pantry, but also learn all the recipes it works for and why it's so wonderful. All right, let me hurry a little faster here. Down here we've got brown sugar. You're very familiar with that, and really mostly what that is often white sugar with just a little hint of molasses in it, and that's why you get that kind of soft texture to it, where it kind of sticks together a little bit. That's all you're seeing is a white sugar with some molasses in it. It's wonderful, and have some on hand, but know that you could probably replicate it if you just kept some good, wonderful raw organic sugar and some molasses on hand. You could probably work up in a jiffy your own version of brown sugar and be just fine. All right, I've already talked to you about white sugar, and there I've got some. Let me mention this. I've gotten a lot of flack because in our video on 21 Forever Foods, I mentioned this light corn syrup, and I'll tell you, it's indefinitely shelf stable, and by that I mean up to 30 years it will last on your shelf without going bad. However, it is correct. This is made with corn. It is a GMO. It's a genetically modified product. It's not something that is the best for you, so keep that in mind, but it is indefinitely shelf stable, and in a difficult situation, I'm going to be thankful for it, and I'm going to use it. So I want that to at least be on your radar. Okay, and then you can get raw sugar that's in large grain. That's something that's easy for all of us to use. You would need to get it finer, though, to make anything like cakes or something with that, if that's the kind of sugar you have in storage. Now, let's talk about, for those of you who are a diabetic or simply conscious of how much sugar you're intaking, and you know it's not good for us to have too much, so you want to be health conscious about all of that. You see that I've got some of our options here. I've got fake Splenda, Sweet and Low, Equal. Those represent a myriad of different fake sweeteners that you can get out there. If I could put a giant red circle with a X through it right now, I would say put it up on the screen because you do not want fake sweeteners. No fake sweeteners. There's only one slight exception to that rule, and let me explain it, and that would be organic raw stevia. And so you need to look closely at the packets, but you are capable of finding them. If you look closely, it should say that it's organic, and it should be entirely stevia that you're getting in there, not a bunch of extra filler ingredients. But if you can find that, that would be my only one I could recommend to you for the long run. Now, even better than all of this, let me say this. Think about growing your own sweeteners. I've already mentioned sorghum, which is a fantastic crop for you to have out back. Those of you who are in the part of the country or the world where you can have maple trees, tap into them, learn about them, do it. If you can keep bees, that's even a wonderful option if you're not in a very metropolitan area where that's just out of the question. But one that most of us can grow is stevia. And I've got some here. I grow it outside, out back, and I absolutely love this little plant. It is something that you have to plant the seeds in each year. It's not going to automatically keep growing on its own unless you maybe pull it in some sort of a pot for the winter. But you can grow this in your garden, and if you let it go to seed, it should reseed and come back on its own probably the very next year, which I do highly recommend. Stevia, if you cannot grow it yourself, you can order it online. Here's what my initial little bag was that I purchased a couple of years ago when I wanted stevia leaf extract and learn about it when it was all a new thing out there. You can order it online in that loose, dried form, and that's fantastic. Literally, you could just put this in almost like one of those little tea fobs that you can steep in right with your tea, and it's going to sweeten it beautifully. It's just not as wonderful in coffees, I don't think, but you can learn how to use it even in cooking. So you can use it raw, you can use it in that version, or you can buy either the liquid drops that you would drop into your recipes, or if you're trying to put a little bit of sweetener in everybody's bug out bag so that they have some for their morning coffee or such, absolutely you want to have some of these little packets that are all organic. Keep in mind that some honeys are higher quality than others, and some will crystallize where others with a lower glucose content are going to crystallize much slower or never at all. And that's the kind you really like to have on your shelf so that you never have to heat it up to get it to turn back into a liquid form if it's 20 or 30 years from now that you need to use it. All right, I haven't covered nearly all of the options that you have out there, but I hope that you'll write in and let us know what your favorites are, and even share your recipes for different types of things that you make with your long-term storage of sweeteners that you have on hand. I'll be sharing another video in the future of stevia and also of that sorghum that we talked about earlier, but I want to hear from you. Will you take a moment and share this video with someone who you love that it might bless? And also, I want to just say a huge thank you to any of you who have been able to hop on over to Patreon and support us, even in the smallest increments. Even $1 per video makes such a difference. Thank you so much. All right, until I see you again, go out and be a blessing to someone today, and I will see you next time. You might have learned this one already, but before you go, I want to share 1 John chapter 4, verses 7 and 8. It says this, "Beloved, let us love one another, for the love of God is with us, and whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. Anyone who does not love doesn't know God, because God is love." Now go spread the word.